The Druid. So one of the fun things we did with the Druid is we tried to have different tiers based on different themes of being a Druid. Level 15 is all themed about being a cat. Doesn't mean that only the feral cat spec is interested in these. It means that they're just kind of themed that way. Feline Swiftness is the movement ability we have now. Displacer Beast is a really fun ability that lets you kind of move in a random direction and get out of any kind of dots that are on you at the time. And then Tireless Pursuit is basically a second dash. So if you want to be the really mobile guy getting around the battlefield, you can do Tireless Pursuit. You'll see a lot of the Druid abilities will say something like, this ability activates X. So rather than having to jump to Cat and then hit Displacer Beast, if you're a Moonkin and you hit Displacer Beast, you'll go into Cat as part of that. Okay, level 30 is kind of a healing tier. You know, rest of Druids are going to care a lot about this, but because the Druid's a hybrid class, we wanted the other specs to feel like they could do a little bit of healing as well, even if it's something they're using on themselves. So Nature Swiftness is your next spell is instant. It's pretty similar to what we have today. Renewal is a big heal that you can do on yourself. And then Cenarian Ward, you designate a target and put a shield on them, and then they'll get healed when the shield gets broken. Okay, tier 45 is, has some crowd control in here. Fairy Swarm is one of those spells that replaces Fairy Fire, but in this case it's also more powerful than Fairy Fire because it does the snare as well. Mass Entanglement's exactly what it sounds like. Root everything. And then we thought it'd be a lot of fun to put Typhoon in here, so if you want to be the bear with Typhoon, here's your chance. Level 60 is a pretty cool tier. What we did in this case is we said, let's take something cool that different talent trees have and make it available to everyone. So Wild Charge is a new version of Feral Charge. If you take this talent, you get a lot of different movement abilities, one for every different form you can go into. So if you're Bear, you get the Bear Charge. If you're Moonkin, you get the Moonkin Charge. The way Incarnation works is, depending on your spec, it activates a super powerful version of your spec. So if you like Tree of Life, this is where you get Tree of Life. If you want to say, you know, I would like to be a cat that kind of turns into the super powered cat version, you can also pick this talent. There's super boomkin and everything in here. And then finally, Force of Nature. It's not just the 3 treants you know and love today, but the 3 treants do different things depending on your spec. We didn't want to have the gigantic tooltip here. It works a little bit like the Guardian of Ancient Kings, where there's a variant depending on each of the 4 Druid specs. Remember, there's 4 Druid specs now. All right. Obviously a bear theme. Demoralizing Shout and Demoralizing Roar was one of those abilities that we weren't sure the game really needed anymore. They were kind of just maintenance-y. The debuff wasn't that interesting. We thought, let's just get rid of them and focus the tank debuffs around the more interesting Thunderclap and Sunder and things like that. So this is not the Demoralizing Roar you have today. This Demoralizing Roar is actually CC and does a group disorient. Ursol's Vortex, it can be used in any shapeshift form, but it's bear themed and it pulls all the enemies to you in wind. And then Bear Hug is a really interesting kind of stun where you're a bear, you've grabbed the bad guy, they're stunned, but you have to sit there and keep stunning them. And if you walk away, they're gonna break out. All right. Level 90, I mentioned before, we really wanted the kit to remind players the kit of the Druid is you can do lots of different things. That was always what the Druid is originally about. We've moved a little bit away from that by letting players specialize so much into, you know, I'm a cat, all I care about is cat stuff. I'm not going to pay attention to anything else. So level 90, we give you a choice of how you want to be a shapeshifter. There's a lot of different things here. Heart of the Wild feels really powerful. It's the one that says, you know, even though I'm a balanced Druid, I still want to be a fairly good healer. I'm not as good a healer as a Resto Druid, but I'm willing to give up a talent point and be a pretty good healer. Same thing is true of Feral. This Feral, the Feral spec, if you pick Heart of the Wild, gives you the ability to have better armor in bear form and have a little higher intellect, but you're not going to be as powerful as a druid who picks that spec. So that's Heart of the Wild is more about focusing on that form. Master Shapeshifter has to do with the actual act of shifting itself. So every time you shift, you increase your damage and attack power, which stacks up. So if you shift multiple times, you can build up this buff on yourself. And then Disentanglement, when you shapeshift, it removes roots and does a heal. And there's the full Druid tree.
Hey guys, this is Pandora with TGN, and I am doing a review of the Druid talent tree changes that have been happening and just been announced by BlizzCon, and I have with me the Alpha Druid. Say hello.
What's up, friends and viewers? Thanks for having me, Pandora. You could not have picked a better individual to do this review. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, very well. How long have you actually been playing the Druid class?
Well, actually, a lot of people don't know about me. I started playing while I was a hunter, and that was in the middle of BC. I didn't start my druid until the early Ratho Lich King. In fact, I leveled my druid to 80 before I leveled any other character, so he was my main, I would say, for about 2.5, 3 years now. If that's accurate, I'm not really sure. But yeah, quite a bit of experience, but not nearly as much as some of the people that have been playing this game for 6 years.
Well, yeah, some people have been playing this game religiously. Why did you actually choose the druid?
It was actually it's a really nerdy answer, but I'm cool with it because I'm comfortable with that. I read the War of the Ancients trilogy, which was a 3-part series written by Richard A. Knack. For those of you that don't know, that's a Blizzard basically in-depth story. It's a very, very long chapter book. It's amazing. It's one of my favorite books. I mean, you wouldn't expect it coming from a fantasy series like Warcraft, but it is sensational. And it takes place about 10,000 years before the current timeline. And I just fell in love with the story of druids in that book. I mean, Cenarius, Malfurion, and the whole foundation of druidism. It's so intriguing to me, and that's really what sold me on it. As soon as I finished that book, I'm like, all right, I gotta play a druid in WoW. And ever since then, I've loved the class.
Cool. It's good that you actually got into the books and things. So,
oh yeah, I'm a real fiend when it comes to that stuff.
So what do you actually think of the new release, The Mist of Pandaria? Do you think it's kind of a good idea, or?
I mean, the WoW community has a real big problem with it because a lot of them believe that World of Warcraft is a really, let's just say, competitive game, and they take it really seriously, in fact too seriously, and they forget that it's a game that's based on fantasy. So I mean, you can complain about pandas all you want, guys, but in reality Warcraft 3 had Pandaria in them, and this game has some really unique stylistic approaches. So I think the feelings about it are really mixed, and right now people either love it or they hate it. There's very few people that are neutral about it. Really, I don't think it's going to destroy this game because it's actually going to bring in a new audience that hasn't been here previously, simply because the community has been so focused on this being a really serious game, and I don't think that's right. I don't think that's what Blizzard wants, and I think that's being made obvious with the new expansion. Yeah. I'm not worried for the game. I might have been before they announced the expansion, but not anymore. I think the marketing strategy is ingenious.
It's a very good direction to kind of go. Very cuddly.
Yeah, especially since the game is aging and starting to show its age, and there's going to be a lot of other MMOs out there to compete in the industry, and they need to find a niche, and I think they've done a really nice job with that.
That's cool. So what do you think about the talents that are now being rolled out, like this talent system? They're trying to get rid of the cookie cutters, but do you think they're going to do that, or do you think they're just making their own kind of version of cookie cutters?
Cookie cutters, I mean, they kind of started in WoW is the thing. So they're trying to stray away from it when really they're the ones that established it in other games. I honestly, like, I wasn't very excited about the new expansion before BlizzCon, and really when I was watching it, I wasn't all too excited about it. But the talent system looks really, really nice. Like they haven't actually established how your spec will affect your character specifically, kind of the way it does now. All they've really done is gone over kind of the new way you accumulate abilities as you're leveling and such, which I think is a fantastic idea, and I'll tell you why. Nowadays, you basically have 3 specs that you choose from for every class. Each one of those specs is very similar to other people's. So, say for instance, you have 3 Rep Paladins, probably only 3 points difference in allocation, whether or not they're doing PvE or PvP. The specs are very similar. In Mists of Pandaria, at level 90, all 3 of those players probably have totally different ability sets depending on how they like to play, what they're playing, and they can switch their specs very easily as well. I think it absolutely does abolish the cookie cutter builds, more so than it has in the past, especially if they add more diversity like they did in Wrath with glyphs, like they were planning to do with Path of the Titans and Cataclysm. I mean, this is a lot of customization that people aren't really giving them credit for. I think it's great.
Yeah, a lot of people are slating it before they've even really tried it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the business. People will complain that the game is too synonymous and there's not enough new feeling to it, and now that they're finally changing stuff drastically, they're still complaining.
Well, change is always scary, whether you're a gamer or it's in real life, so...
Yeah, try being American and your president says nothing except change. Change! You're like, okay, man, whatever.
Okay, well, the talents are kind of set out in a six-tier format sort of thing. So in the first tier, we see a lot of focus on the cat form. So what do you think about the tireless pursuit? Will it help in raids as well as PvP? Or could there have been kind of better things in there rather than just that?
Tireless Pursuit actually is not as groundbreaking as people might think, because it's exactly the same as the current build of Dash right now. Now, I'm a little bit confused because if they're going to add this ability to the game, it seems like they have to remove Dash. Dash already increases movement speed for 70%, for 15 seconds, I believe. And if you're spec'd into Feral Swiftness, which is a tier 1 Druid talent in the current build of the game, it already removes rooting and snaring effects. So that's kind of a feral niche that they can have in the current build of Cataclysm. Tireless Pursuit being available for other specs like Balance, Guardian, or Restoration, it does present some diversity, but I really don't think it's going to change that too much. I mean, from a Raider's perspective, I wouldn't probably take Tireless Pursuit because there's not a whole lot of situations where you need to move that fast, and if you're rooted in place, you can usually just cleanse it off. Or there's other ways of dealing with it. I think that Feline Swiftness would be a much more valuable talent because it gives you 10% static movement speed as a raider, which is going to help you move around quite a bit, get out of fire and stuff like that. And it's basically the same thing that Feral Swiftness is currently when you shift into cat form. I mean, Tireless Pursuit is a really interesting ability, but it's not going to change a whole lot the way that they have it worded there because it basically already exists in the game as it stands.
But what if they have gotten rid of Dash? Because we don't actually know if they've taken things out yet. They haven't told us exactly what's in and what's out.
If they've gotten rid of Dash, then that's interesting because, well, we also have to know if they've gotten rid of Stampeding Roar. I mean, they just haven't revealed enough information. Assuming they haven't removed Dash, then this ability would probably have to share a cooldown with Dash currently. Tireless Pursuit, that is. Otherwise, you're going to see feral druids running around like Usain Bolt in battlegrounds and arenas, and it's just going to be kind of preposterous. But if they did get rid of Dash, then you basically need to take this ability as for PvP or as a feral druid in general, because it actually does help you deal damage. Dash is a very valuable talent in raiding as well. It's definitely a must-have if they did get rid of Dash, I would say. But it's very difficult because all 3 of these talents in the level 15, the tier 1 talents, are extremely valuable for any spec, really. So, I don't know. I mean, it's too early to say. We don't know enough about it.
Oh yeah, we'll just have to wait and see until they release more information. Possibly the beta or the alpha. We just got to wait and see. So, when you choose a talent, as you can see there, it says like activates cat form. Do you think this is something we should have seen earlier, or do you think we should have to go into the specific form to then use it? Because at the minute, if you change it to cat form, your bars will change. Do you think they're gonna get rid of that, or?
I wouldn't be surprised, but I kind of doubt it. The thing about druids in general is they're the most versatile class in WoW. It's obvious because they're adding another spec to it. They've always been able to do ranged, melee, DPS, as well as tanking and healing. So they need all of these action bars in order to fulfill all these tasks. That's why I consider the Druid to be the highest skill cap class. If you're playing something like Feral, you need to have a really high APM because you need to be shapeshifting very frequently. However, I don't think that shapeshifting as a prerequisite for abilities like, what are we using as an example here? Just in general. For example, for a Resto Druid, in order to use dash, have to first shift into cat form. I don't think that really adds anything to the game. It's added difficulty, but it's also a lot more that somebody has to be concerned with. The time they're spending micromanaging things that it could be using to look around in the battlefield or in the raid. I'm not against it. It does dumb it down a little bit, but I think overall it's a good change because it appeals to a wider audience of people who don't have to, really concentrate on shapeshifting. They can just use these abilities to get a movement speed boost or to blink away, not have to worry about shifting into a feral form. I think it'll make. I mean, Balance and Rest of Druids, they don't really use other abilities that require shapeshifting because they don't want to be caught in bear form as a Balance Druid or something. And I think that'll kind of just go away now that they have so much more versatility. I mean, I like it. I like the change.
Yeah,
Short answer.
I can understand that. I used to raid as a balanced druid, and I'd click a button and it would come out, and then I'd forget to go back in. It was just a nightmare. So this for me is pretty good because I always forget.
Yeah, that is an interesting question you pose about what they're gonna do with action bars automatically changing when you shift into forms, though. Because I mean, theoretically, if you cast Tireless Pursuit as a Resto Druid, it takes you into cat form, right? And then you have to manually shift out of cat form to start healing again. I mean, some people will be a little bit thrown off about that.
Yeah, it doesn't actually say later on whether or not healing shifts you back out, or if you have to shift back out manually.
Well, it does currently now. If you're in cat form and you cast a healing spell, it automatically takes you into humanoid form.
Well, yes, but with the changes, who knows? Maybe it will be different. But we see here with Dispenser Beast that it's very much like the Hunter's Disengage, and we do seem to be seeing a lot of things that are like the Hunter and now the Druid have this, and mages and other things, they all seem to have the same kind of abilities. And here it kind of is very random. Do you think it should be more directed like the Hunter's Disengage, like they'll face backwards and jump backwards, whereas it's very random, so you could end up falling into lava, for instance?
Yeah. I wouldn't really compare it to the Hunter Disengage. I think further down the tree we have the Feral Leap or something. The equivalent of Feral Charge. Balanced Druids have basically the same thing as a Disengage. This is much more... I agree with you in saying that it is random because I wouldn't expect a Druid to be able to do this. It's very strange. I mean, it's essentially a Vanish with the Cloak of Shadows, right? It removes all DOTs and it turns you invisible. So, I mean, that alone is extremely valuable. That's like a Vanish right there that Feral Druids don't have currently. Or any Druid for that matter. But it also teleports them in a random direction. Now, I don't know what the hell they were thinking with this. 20 yards is a long way. That's even further than a Blink. I think Blink is 15 yards currently. Yeah. So the way I envision this is being a 3-minute cooldown, obviously. But if I had to combine 3 abilities, it would probably be a Blink, a Vanish, and a Cloak of Shadows. So overall, this is going to make Druids extremely difficult to kill because... Think about it. You're trying to kill a Restoration Druid, and all of a sudden he Displacer Beasts, and he's invisible anywhere within 20 yards of your location, and he's not gonna be knocked out of that invisibility because he's removed all his DOTs. So it's extremely powerful. I think they have to be really careful with this ability in PvP because obviously doesn't really pose. I mean, it'll reset combat, in dungeons and such if you're about to die. Aggro reset and everything, but really this is a PvP ability, and it sounds really, really strong to me. I think they need to be careful with how they implement this because it could turn out to be, Feral Druid even being more stealthy than a rogue, for example, and having more escapability than a mage. It's just they already have so many utilities with their healing spells and their movement speed already that this kind of just pushes it overboard.
Maybe it will change in the future. We'll just have to kind of see, I suppose. And, we have tier 2 of the tree, and that's mainly focused on healing, not necessarily just for the Resto Druids, but everything seems to have a little bit of healing now added in. And I know you don't usually heal on your Druid, but what do you think about them getting a shield, almost like the Priest shield?
Well, I did used to do quite a bit of healing. In fact, when I was raiding Ulduar and such, I was mostly a Resto Druid. And I actually did a lot of Resto Druid Arena as well. As far as the Cenarian Ward, which is the shield you're talking about, it reminds me a lot of Living Seed. So those of you that remember that one, it was where you crit with a heal on a target. It automatically places a Living Seed on them. The next time they take damage, they'll get healed. I'm not against it. I mean, I don't think it really adds anything new to the class. Absorbing and healing ultimately is kind of the same thing. It's just that this is a much more reliable source of healing. For example, you place this on somebody, you get crowd controlled. If that's your arena partner or something, they'll still be getting healed while you're being CC'd and such. So it's really a safeguard. I think it'll be more powerful for tank healing in PvP and not so much for raid healing or even in dungeon healing. I mean, it's kind of just a little bit of a priest flavor in the Druid class. I like it. I mean, I think rest of the Druids are really kind of boring, so to speak, because they have so many healing over time effects, and adding them, giving them a shield as well as giving them some big heals like they did in Cataclysm. I think it'll be pretty much really versatile. No reason to roll a different healer if you have a resto Druid.
Well, yeah, I always enjoyed healing as a resto Druid just because of the hops. You can kind of sit there and hop people up, and then you'd be done for like a couple of seconds. You could kind of sit back and know nobody was going to die. But as I said before, we were seeing a lot of like kind of cross-class spells. Do you think they're trying to enforce the belief that when raiding you take the player, not the class?
I think they've been trying to do that for a long time. However, I think these sorts of changes where they're trying to give classes a way of basically mirroring each other or even countering each other, I think that's actually more geared towards PvP. Although it is kind of a futile effort because they can't balance both. They can't have a really balanced PvE and PvP scene, and they've been trying to do it for 6 years, and they've pretty much given up on it. But with regards to making classes similar, I think that is really towards PvP. I mean, in a raid, whether or not somebody has a shield or not is not really going to make or break an encounter unless you're really, really into the heroic stuff. So I think for the regular player, it doesn't really make a difference if classes have, you know, say for instance, they gave disciplined priests more powerful healing over time effects to be more comparable to a druid. I don't think that really changes whether or not you would prefer one class over the other in a raiding situation, simply because healing is mostly about the player to begin with.
That is very true. You can't have a bad healer and expect to get very far, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't think there's a question that certain classes have always been better at fulfilling certain roles. For example, Paladin healer is a much better tank healer than the other classes, or at least they have back when I was raiding. And the other 3 classes were a lot more focused on raid healing. So, I mean, as long as the way I look at the Cenarian Ward being, you know, an absorb effect is mostly just giving them more tank healing utility. So, I mean, yes and no. To answer your original question, I'm kind of rambling on here, but I mean, there's a lot to discuss with these changes. I mean, this is such a diverse game, and you know, anytime they add a little ability like this, it just opens up a whole new world of opportunity for the class.
Well, yeah, certainly. I mean, we're going to see a whole different game style from a lot of classes after seeing these changes.
Yeah.
I mean, the tier 3 we have is very much CC based, and here we have kind of an improved fairy fire in the form of fairy swarm. How do you think we're going to be able to see this in combat?
Snare effects typically don't work on PvE mobs unless they're unless they're not a boss. So, I mean, yeah, you might see it having some use when you're kiting as a bear tank or something, but reality, apart from the armor decrease, this is a PvP ability here. And already feral fairy fire, or even balanced fairy fire is so strong against certain classes that rely on invisibility. Also, that reduced armor increases your damage quite a bit in feral spec because you deal 100% physical damage. But the big thing to be concerned with here is that it's a 50% movement speed decrease. Now, if you're a rogue, this is going to be the bane of your existence. Fairy fire has always been a pain in the ass to deal with as a rogue. But if you want to be a killer in like a battleground or an arena, even, this is going to be an extremely powerful ability. I think it's overpowered in its current form because that snare is going to be renewable. It's only on a 6-second cooldown in a feral spec, and the snare lasts 15 seconds. So that's a perma snare that you're going to have on your opponent, in addition to infected wounds, if they choose to keep that in the game. But it's just added utility to an already extremely powerful ability. Although you do have to choose between 2 other really powerful abilities. So, I mean, it's really geared towards a feral druid, I would have to say.
Sure.
And basically what I'm saying is it will crush rogues, other ferals, or any class that relies on any form of invisibility, which includes a mage.
That's not bad. We always want to see the rogues get killed. Come on, they hurt us all the time with their poisons and stuns and stuff.
Yeah.
There seems to be like something in each class gaining a lot of CCs en masse, such as the mass entanglement, where you can do like root everything in 12 yards. There's a lot of that going on. Do you think we're going to be seeing a lot of need for this kind of thing in raids or PvP, or is it just geared towards PvP when you're trying to get the flag or something, stop everyone around you? What's your take on that?
I think it's both, honestly. I mean, I would really be surprised if you could take Mass Entanglement and still have Nature's Grasp in this game. I think they'll probably end up removing Nature's Grasp from the current build of the game. But with regards to mass area of effect CC like this reminds me a lot of Death Knight's Hunger and Cold, or whatever the name of the ability is, where it's basically an AoE freeze or Ring of Frost. It's going to provide a lot of utility in both PvP and PvE. I mean, those solo enthusiasts, people like me that love to solo shit that's not supposed to be soloed, this is a perfect example of an ability you can use for that. It's a 1 minute cooldown. If you're a bear tank and you're in control of your group, in a dungeon for instance, you can pull a really high DPS target and then use Mass Entanglement and root everything else in place, kite that target to a safe location. I mean, this can be used to mitigate damage and tanking so well. And also insane peels, obviously. I mean, in Battlegrounds, or even if you're just a Restoration Druid and you got 2 targets on you, this is a huge getaway. I think this is a really powerful ability. I'm interested to see how it can be used to exploit questing and PvE and dungeons. And for obvious reasons, it will be very powerful in PvP as well. In every component of PvP except for dueling.
I can imagine it's going to be very, very frustrating in PvP if you've got 3 of your buddies on this one guy, they mass entangle you and then run away and you can't catch them. Yeah,
I mean, you can already use Nature's Grasp to great effect to do that. I mean, I can go in against 3 players, essentially 3 melee players, in bear form, Nature's Grasp, and then just dash away, and there's not really anything they can do about it unless they use their trinkets or, it's a big pain in the ass, and it's going to frustrate a lot of people who want to kill Resto Druids or Feral Druids. I don't think that a Balanced Druid would ever take this ability, though, because they already have buffed up Entangling Roots, and Typhoon, obviously, would be an alternative that they would need to take.
Yeah, that takes us to the next question. What do you think about a bear taking Typhoon now that you can?
I think it's really strange. I mean, I think Blizzard thought about this one for a long time before they decided to make it available to the other 2 specs. I'm not against it again. If you think about it, logically, a druid is already a humanoid shapeshifting into other forms, but he should still maintain those powers that he has in humanoid form. So it would make sense that a balanced druid can shift into a bear currently, and he also has the ability to cast Typhoon. So I mean, it doesn't like baffle me that they've chosen to do this. But to have a Feral Druid running around with this ability, or even a Resto Druid, is just really funny. I mean, let's be honest, you don't really want it if you're going to be a Feral. You might take it if you're a Resto Druid, but I mean, it's just going to be hilarious. I mean, think about it. You're in Arathi Basin, you're guarding the lumber mill, tanking the crap out of people in a bear spec, and then boom, Typhoon off the cliff. I mean, it's going to be more fun than anything else, but I personally wouldn't really experiment with this much unless I was just trying to troll people.
Well, everyone likes a little bit of trolling here and there.
Yeah.
Now, the tier 4 doesn't really have a theme. Like, it wasn't actually stated that this was around a particular kind of thing. It's more just where things are going, I think, as far as I can tell. But we have the introduction of Incarnation to the tree. What do you think about the idea of being able to have a super version of yourself with only a 3-minute cooldown? Especially considering in PvE, most boss fights, you can probably activate that twice, if not more.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, a lot of people weren't a big fan of the changes they made for the Tree of Life. In Vanilla through Wrath, it was a form like Moonkin that gave you enhanced healing abilities, and they turned it into a cooldown. Some people like this, some people don't, but the reality is when they turned Tree Form into a cooldown, it actually brought a lot of diversity to the class, and it was a strategic ability. All this Incarnation is doing is taking that concept and applying it to Feral. I don't know if they have any plans to integrate this for balance. It doesn't sound like it based on what I've seen, but the idea of having a super cat form is really intriguing to people like me. For those of you that don't know the ability, basically every 3 minutes you can shift into a super cat, for 30 seconds that allows you to use abilities that require stealth without being in stealth. So that means free ravages, free pounces, and it also allows you to prowl while in combat. So that's like giving you a vanish for 30 seconds. That what I just said is really scary if you're fighting a feral, because that's 30 seconds. They probably won't need to kill you, and so I mean they're just gonna be spamming ravage on you and pouncing on you. They've got to change the way that the class is currently designed if they want this to go live, because as it stands right now, that will be completely overpowered in PvE and PvP for a cat. As far as the resto tree form, it's not really changing. It's just they're renaming the tree form into incarnation. I mean, I think the way that they've worded it here, you won't have Tree of Life unless you take incarnation as a talent. So that would be kind of a requisite for resto druids. Again, I don't know what they plan to do with this for balance, but for feral, I mean, it's extremely exciting to have this as an option. I mean, there's no word of a super bear just yet, but I think they would probably add that in there as well.
Yeah, for balance, it is applicable for that as well. I do believe it was mentioned during the panel when they were rolling this out. Most of the kind of information, it doesn't go too big. So I don't think they just put that in there just because there was not enough space, basically.
Yeah.
But he does verbally say that you can have a super boomkin, and I didn't quite catch if there was a bear, but I heard the boomkin because that interests me a lot.
Okay, yeah, Star Surge and Starfires with a shit ton of bonus damage, definitely exciting as well. What they would do with it probably is similar to an Arcane Power for Arcane Mage, except no increased mana cost. Basically just give you the ability to nuke people. Maybe they make Starfire an instant cast, who knows. This ability is really exciting. I think it'll add a lot of flavor to the Druid class, and probably see everybody rolling a Druid.
Again. With the Force of Nature, it's very much like the Guardian of Intent. Now, you have your usual 3 treants, but now they all have special little abilities, kind of based on what you take as a spec. Are you kind of excited about that? What do you think about that?
It reminds me a lot of Mirror Image. I mean, if you're familiar with the Mage ability, basically you spawn 3 images that either cast Arcane Blast, Fireball, or Frostbolt, and you apply that same mechanic to a Druid. I would say if you could summon these in Feral, they melee, they deal a lot of damage, maybe some bleeds or something. I doubt it. If you do it in Balance, they'll probably start casting Wrath. If you do it in Resto, they'll probably help heal. I mean, it adds way more flavor to the ability than before, where they were kind of just useless. They had a little bit extra damage, kind of a distraction in PvP, but not really all that interesting. I think if they make these changes, it'll be really cool to see. I mean, I wouldn't personally take this ever in Feral spec, but I think it would probably be most valuable for a Resto Druid to have that bonus healing from NPCs. Probably prioritize their targets and cast Rejuvenation or something. I'd be interested to see what they do with its ability. Overall, it's exciting, yeah.
It'd be really cool how it's used in PvP. I'd love to see how that works. A bunch of them like running at them with like various different spells, like stunning and stuff. That'd be really funny.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't really seen much really aimed at bears. So tier 5 is very much for the bears, and they've very much changed Demoralizing Roar. What is your take on that?
Again, I've kind of stated it already that they need to be careful with a lot of these abilities to make sure they don't cross the line of balance. Obviously, I don't know the other classes nearly as well as I know this one, but to me, this ability just screams frustration. I mean, look at it. It's a 30-second cooldown, and essentially what they're saying with this is that it's going to be an AoE scatter shot within 10 yards of your character. So anybody within 10 yards of you is going to get concussed for 4 seconds. This is similar to a blind effect, or in fact, probably a better comparison to concussive shot would be Dragon's Breath. Just basically screws you over for 4 seconds. And it's a 30-second cooldown. Okay, imagine trying to chase down a Resto Druid or even a Feral Druid, and they just pop this Demoralizing Roar and, get out 3 stacks of Life Plume and GG, like Shadow Meld or, whatever. It's going to be a major, major pain in the ass. I mean, already killing Resto Druids is a pain in the ass, and this is going to be really, really frustrating. It also will give a bear tank a lot of survivability. Say, for example, the way a Prot Warrior mechanic works with Shockwave. Shockwave disables an AoE area of effect. AoE area of effect. And that, might gets a lot of damage. This is similar in that you can deal damage to these targets while they're disoriented like this for 4 seconds. So say you're getting nuked, your healer needs a little bit of time to catch up, pop Demoralizing Roar. You'll take no damage for 4 seconds, and it's a 30-second cooldown. I mean, it's really, really strong the way they have it worded here. Comparison to those other 2 abilities, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't compare to the utility of this Demoralizing Roar.
Fair enough. Well, we do have a new talent here, completely new, which is Ursul's Vortex, and it's kind of like a death grip for druids. But we also see again this Mass Effect theme where it's kind of seeing everything, and you know what I mean. We're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting, especially since they named it after one of the bear demigods. Or so. It is like an AoE life grip. I would honestly draw more parallels to other games, but let's keep this to WoW right now. I don't know about it because, I mean, obviously it's a tanking ability, right? It's almost like a taunt. Maybe they'll get rid of the AoE taunt that bears have. But it also presents some utility in PvP. However, I just don't know if that's a good thing. I mean, yeah, it can peel off your ally. Like I said, it's just, I would have to see how it works. And it probably wouldn't even compare to the utility of Demoralizing Roar they have it explained here. I would say that this ability needs to be redesigned because there's very few situations where you would want to have everything around you pulled on top of you unless you were tanking. So either you would take this for dungeons or raids or take something else.
That's fair enough. So what would you maybe change it to? Do you have any kind of preferences?
Maybe if it pulled them in and it gave them a snare and maybe a DOT or something. I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't seem very useful to me unless I were tanking. I'd have to see how it works in live.
Well, yeah, unfortunately with a lot of these we've not seen how they actually work, which nicely takes us to Bear Hug. How useful do you think this is actually going to be? I mean, the only way I can actually see this working is maybe in PvP, where you bear hug the healer and then nuke down something else, because while you're bear hugging someone, you are incapacitated yourself. It only stuns them and holds them as long as you're holding too.
Mm. Does it say it cancels if you take damage? No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so if those of you that know, bears are notorious for having a lot of HP. If you read this ability, it says that it deals 10% of the druid's health in every second for 3 seconds. So that's 30% of your total health over 3 seconds. That's a lot of damage. I mean, you're going to have a lot more stamina than a regular player, especially a healer, when you're using this ability. So that's a lot of damage to be concerned about. And it also CCs people. It looks like 3-second control. Stun, basically. So it's not a whole lot of time. It's 3 seconds that you have to be concerned about not moving. And it's also a hard disable that deals a lot of damage. So this would be very, very valuable in arenas. 2s or 3s, maybe even 5s. But again, Demoralizing Roar, you compare this ability to that, and it's just grim in comparison. I mean, for 2s arenas, this would be really valuable. But again, I don't think Blizzard is even really focusing on arenas in this expansion. And so it would be a really fun ability, funny to see it happen to somebody, and just extra utility. But again, it's hard for me to imagine taking this ability instead of Demoralizing Roar, because that ability just looks so overpowered. Like 30-second cooldown. This is a 1-minute cooldown. It disables one target. In that amount of time, you disable somebody for 8 seconds, but everybody around you in 10 yards. And you can deal so much more damage like that. So I would say this would kind of be useless in a PvE situation and only really useful in a small-scale arena.
I just want to see the animation. I want to see what happens if the bear actually kind of like mounts the guy.
Yeah, that would be funny.
With tier 6, which is the level 90 tier, it's very much about how you want to be a shifter yourself. Now, Heart of the Wild gives everyone a little bit more survival with huge buffs in armor, as well as giving a lot more hit rating. Do you think this is a good move? Are we going to see a lot more druids in PvP, like just not dying no matter what you do to them, especially considering the other talents we have seen?
This is a really exciting ability when you take a look at it. I mean, it's a 6-minute cooldown, so obviously it would be kind of like your ultimate or last talent point in your spec. That's kind of what they're going for with the level 90 talents. It reminds me a lot of Incarnation. It's a 6-minute cooldown that basically is a massive buff for 45 seconds. Now, this allows for hybridization, even if you're like specking intellect in a feral spec. They really shine through in this build with this talent. So, I mean, I'm really excited to see what they do with the resto side of things, because the way they describe balance and feral, it sounds like resto will be able to deal significant spell damage when using this ability. But they're giving balance and feral the ability to heal very effectively for 45 seconds. So this would be really, really powerful in PvP, even Battlegrounds, but more importantly for arenas. For off healing, absolutely. For raiding, absolutely off healing. Dungeons even. If there's a fight where there's going to be a really healing intensive moment, use Heart of the Wild, pop out of cat form or what have you, and start healing the crap out of people. 50% of your agility is intellect. Hit rating, that allows you to deal a lot of spell damage as feral as well. So, I mean, basically, if, say for instance, you're feral, you use Heart of the Wild, for 45 seconds you can fulfill a ranged DPS role or a healer role. Half-ass, but you can still do it. And I imagine, Balance and Resto will be able to do the other two roles. Say, for instance, a Balance or Resto Druid is able to tank for 45 seconds. Even possibly tank a raid boss. I mean, it gives the jack of all trades kind of aspect of a Druid, and it just amplifies it. It's really exciting. That's exactly why I like to play a Druid on the gameplay side of things. And I think it'll really be a place for skilled players to show that they are experienced with this class and really use it effectively.
Cool. That's a lot to take in there. That takes us to the Master Shapeshifter. Now, this is really interesting because it means all you have to do is basically shapeshift lots of times, and you get lots and lots of buffs. So all you need to do is basically spam 1 2 1 2 1 2, and then go into your rotation. So do you think this is something cool, or do you think it's a bit overpowered, or how do you see this working?
What it does is it encourages players to play more versatile. I know I'm using that word a lot, but that's really what the Druid class is all about. Shapeshifting is something that every Druid needs to do, especially in PvP, and this just encourages that, to shift in and out for heals, to shift using different forms. Maybe that Balanced Druid give you that extra incentive to shift into bear form and go in for a bash. It encourages people to use the other forms, and it actually rewards people for doing so. So for players that have really understand their class thoroughly, know that in order to play with the maximum potential, you have to use other forms, it's going to complement them very well. I would say this ability is equally powerful to Heart of the Wild, but more focused on PvP, because in a PvE situation, dungeon or raid, or even questing, you don't need to shapeshift nearly as often, and so it won't be as valuable to you. But again, it applies to all three specs, so I mean, it'll be interesting to see what kind of hybrid builds people come up with. I'm not kidding here. You will see Resto and Balanced Druids dealing feral damage, and feral Druids dealing spell and damage and healing. I mean, it's really cool what they've decided to do with this. I like it.
I just can't wait to be in a raid and my Balanced Druid turns into a feral Druid and deals the same amount of damage. I think that would be quite funny.
Yeah, I would bet that they have the balance focus more on the Guardian spec, being able to tank more effectively as opposed to dealing physical damage. Because if you're spec balanced, there's not really any reason for you to want to bleed something. You would just, use your spell damage.
Oh, yeah. Now, one thing that has been brought up is why the Pandaren aren't allowed to be Druids. Now, do you think they should be able to? Now, bear in mind that Blizzard's excuse for this originally was that a bear turning into a bear they didn't really want. However, Worgen can be Druids, and they're wolves, and so it's basically a wolf turning into a bear. And Taurens are cows, and cows are turning into a bear. But later on, they also tried to back that up with actual lore, saying that where the Druids weren't around and things like that, it was all really complicated. I mean, do you think there should be a Druid class for the Pandaren? What's your take?
That's a complicated answer, but I mean, like I said, the reason I started playing a Druid is because I fell in love with the story about them. And it doesn't really make sense to have Worgen Druids either. I mean, they kind of just, slapped together a whole bunch of sloppy lore in Cataclysm to kind of explain why, but really it was done for marketing reasons. I mean, the whole werewolf thing is very attractive to the younger audience, and, you know, they want to have scary looking bear. I mean, it was a stylistic thing. It does make sense for Tauren to be able to shift into druids. Trolls, no, it doesn't make sense. They again slap that together in Cataclysm. It's very sloppily done. I'm not happy with the fact that they added Worgen and Troll Druids to Cataclysm. In fact, I'm still upset about that to this day. I just really don't like it. And it also doesn't make sense in the lore. I mean, they can slap they can slap more stuff together in Mists of Pandaria to explain why not. I'm not a fan of that strategy, but I'm glad they've decided to do this, because druids should really be restricted to the races that make sense to be druids. If you're familiar with the lore and Cenarius and Malfurion and, you know, Hamul Moon Totem to an extent, and it doesn't really make sense for the Pandaren to do it. Also, the excuse that they gave that they don't want bears shifting into bears, I mean, think about that. That's really strange to see a panda shift into a bear that walks on all fours and starts biting and scratching. Like, that would be really strange, and it's certainly a viable answer that they've given. I don't really understand the whole fanboyism behind having every class play a druid. I don't agree with it, and I'm happy that Blizzard made this decision, because I think that it should really only be restricted to Night Elves and Tauren the way it originally was.
That's fair enough. I don't know that much about the lore, but I do know that the Pandaren are supposed to be like a very gentle race. So for me, having them as a druid kind of makes sense, because they're very in touch with their nature. They love their farmland. It's very, very rich and a very powerful kind of thing. But I do understand that obviously the lore's behind it. I just need to learn more about the lore.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can just go into it a little bit. The doctrine of Druidism comes from the demigod Cenarius, okay? So it's his powers that were inherited to him through his mother and his father, who were basically celestial beings. And he taught that to Malfurion, Stormrage, who's the original Druid. He's a Night Elf, who's over, 11,000 years old or whatever. And his apprentice is Hamul Moon Totem, who's the Archdruid of the Tauren. There's no connection between trolls and Worgen druids until they slapped this crap lore and Cataclysm together. I mean, they're essentially doing the same thing with Mists of Pandaria. I mean, there was a Pandaren Brewmaster in Warcraft 3. Sure, this is nothing new, but there wasn't really any backstory about it. And so I'm not a fan with the way that they're telling the story through World of Warcraft. I never have been, and honestly, I think they should just prevent themselves from making drastic decisions like adding Pandaren druids to the game until they actually put some time into thinking, oh, this character development here, we can write a book about it. And so that actually makes cohesive sense. Again, I'm glad that they're not doing it, because they've just done a bang-up job with it in the past. A lot of the classes per races, class per race, kind of a mechanic that they've been adding in through the expansions, it's just done for marketing reasons, to keep the game fresh. And sure, from a business standpoint, that you can't really blame them for that, but it also does have an effect on the level of respect that some people that actually take the story in consideration have for this game. And I mean, I've started to lose all my respect for the storytelling in World of Warcraft, the way that they've added shit like the troll and the Worgen druid so spontaneously. It just doesn't make sense. So I think they're learning from their mistakes.
That's very interesting. It's good to see that they are actually learning and listening to the audience. I know a lot of the audience are really big lore buffs, so it's good that they're taking that into consideration rather than just, lining their pockets to a point.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that do care about the story, but most people are just faction fanboys, and they think the idea of a troll druid is astounding, and that's really what renews their subscriptions. So, I mean, it's really, for Blizzard, it's a choice between dignity and success. I mean, are they willing to sacrifice the soundness of their story for the success of their game? I mean, you can't really blame them for it.
Do you think we're going to see people not playing the Pandaren, though, because they can't have a druid? Or do you think people are actually going to be pushed into different classes, which could be a good thing?
I think there will be a lot of people playing Pandas simply because it's new, it's funny, and it appeals to a certain demographic that hasn't really been interested in the game before. As far as being pushed away or attracted to the panda for which classes they can play, I doubt it. I mean, you're going to see a lot of people with Pandaren monks running around, Pandaren warriors. I mean, it's not really going to change, the number of druids or, you know, paladins, or what else can't they play? Death Knights. I
And
don't think it's going
Warlock.
to change. Okay, yeah, Shadow, obviously. I don't think it's going to change the number of those classes that you see in the game, but I don't think there's going to be anything preventing people from playing pandas, unless they're, you know, wannabe internet macho men that think pandas are stupid and fluffy and they just don't want to touch them because they're too masculine for that. You never know.
Oh, that's hilarious. I cannot play a pant, sorry, yeah. And finally, do you think all the changes that are kind of changing well, for better or for worse, is it going to become too casual? Bear in mind that throughout BlizzCon they made it really perfectly clear that pandas are not a joke. It's something they are seriously passionate about and have spent a lot of time on.
No, it's not a joke. I mean, it was in Warcraft 3, and that hero was absolutely a part of the competitive professional scene of the game. As far as the question, I mean, it really depends on who you ask. You can ask somebody who takes this game really seriously and, you know, prides himself in having a gladiator rating or what have you, or heroic raids, and only cares about whether or not their class is viable in raid or what have you. And those sorts of people that take it really seriously are not going to be happy with these changes, I don't think, because they are making the game a lot more simple. They're making it appeal to a lot wider audience, a lot more beginner friendly. But those people that just take the game casually and, you know, are in it for the fishing on the iPhone or collecting vanity pants, achievement hunting, those people are really going to find a lot more to do in this game. I think Blizzard is trying hard to focus more on the actual world itself, which is a big mistake they've made in the past. And overall, I think that they're doing a fantastic job of keeping the game alive because they know what's coming out. You know, they're aware that there's more serious MMOs that are going to hit the market soon, and they need to be able to offer something that those MMOs don't have. And that's a really casual scene focused heavily on fantasy and just the cartoony appeal of a video game for people like you, or, you know, the younger audience, or older people even. I mean, the cell phone Facebook gaming market is really going to be attracted to this game in a way that they haven't been before. And that is that, hey, look, instead of going out and questing, I can go collect this vanity pet, train him up, name him Pikachu, and Thundershock my opponent for, 60 electric damage in Pokemon minigame. I mean, these sorts of things are exactly what Blizzard needs to do to keep their game fresh and to keep it alive. I don't think the people that claim to be loyal fans of Warcraft or even Blizzard can criticize them for doing what they can to make sure that their game is a success. And I think that's all they're doing.
So, what do you think of the pet system? You did bring it up, like, quite shortly there. So what do you think? Is it kind of like a Pokemon copycat? Or do you think it will actually bring some kind of actual entertainment to the game? Not for the kids, but for the oldies as well.
Yeah, I mean, Blizzard has always tried to add mini games to WoW. You know, things to do in your free time when you're not raiding or PvPing. Just time killers, basically. This is the first time that I have really seen it turn into something that could actually be a legitimate mini game with sustainability. You can take, well, I'm not going to go into detail, but I mean, they've added quests like the Plants vs. Zombies thing that they had in Cataclysm. And there's all kinds of different things that they've done, but the Pokemon thing is something that could actually renew a subscription for World of Warcraft based on that alone. And that is that there's a unique minigame within this MMO that I can't find anywhere else. I'm really intrigued by it. It's a lot of fun, and it's worth my $15 a month. You know? There are people out there like that. Blizzard is aware of that. I don't think it's a bad thing that they're catering to this market. It's a smart thing. And if anything, it just adds more for you to do in this game. I mean, if you're a super serious raider and your guild only raids 2-3 times a week, what the hell else are you going to do in this game? You know? Why not go out, tame a pet, level him up to whatever in Poke Battle? You know? I think it's smart. It's real smart. Smart.
Okay, well that brings us to the close of all the questions I have lined up, and I hope you enjoy the game when it releases, and thank you very much for taking the time to answer all my questions.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me. Hope you guys enjoyed that. It was quite a long interview, but a lot of information.
It was indeed. Well, thanks again, and talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.